the government will run out of funding come Friday. And I think we all know why we are here, and that is because despite last year, the Senate Appropriations Committee passing 11 of the 12 appropriation bills, 6 of them unanimously, all of those 11 with big bipartisan margins, not a single one of them was put on the floor last year by Leader Schumer. And those bills were all available at the end of July. Those bills had all been passed through the Senate Appropriations Committee at the end of July of last year. And so here we are on the brink of a government shutdown, which will be entirely of the Democrats' making if it happens, because the House today will be voting on a continuing resolution to fund the government throughout the end of the year, and we'll send that over here to the Senate where we'll have an opportunity to act on it. A similar continuing resolution passed the end of last year in the Senate with 85 votes. This one should be no different, honestly. But as you all know, it takes 60 votes in the Senate to pass an appropriations bill, so we're going to need some Democrats to vote for it. The Democrats have used the filibuster 3 times this year already, despite arguing for its elimination as recently as a few months ago. But 3 times this year, they've already filibustered bills in front of the Senate. I think the American people are going to be interested to see whether the Democrats are going to filibuster, and by filibustering, shut down the federal government. It is on them if this happens. There is a funding vehicle available coming over from the House of Representatives that will fund the government through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, and we are prepared to take it up here in the Senate and make sure that on Friday the government stays open. But it will be up to the Democrats as to whether or not that happens. Between now and then, we're working on the Stop Fentanyl Act, which is legislation that came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's something that deals with the fentanyl crisis that we have in this country, and Senator Bill Cassidy, the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, has had a lot to do with that issue and with that legislation, and I'm going to ask him to come up and speak to it, and then we'll try and answer any questions you all have. Senator Cassidy.
Thank you. 74,000 fellow Americans died of fentanyl or fentanyl analog overdose last year. Everyone watching, everyone here knows of somebody who has died of a fentanyl overdose. And if you watch the Super Bowl, it would have been more than the crowd within the Superdome who have died this past year, but also every year from a fentanyl overdose. What this bill does, it makes permanent that a fentanyl analog exposes you to the same criminal penalties as if you're selling fentanyl. What's a fentanyl analog? Yeah, I'm a doctor, so I'm going to speak a little bit like a doctor. If you have the chemical structure of fentanyl, which is illegal to have, and you change it just a little bit, and with that change, technically it may no longer be considered fentanyl. But if you take it, you still die. It still has the same terrible effects upon our society as that which is technically fentanyl. What this bill does, the HALT Fentanyl Act, one of the things it does is it says either fentanyl or a fentanyl analog is illegal to possess. It also, so it strengthens the penalty. We've had this on the books temporarily. Now we make it permanent. One more tool for law enforcement to use to fight the scourge of fentanyl. It also allows for research. For those, fentanyl actually has a medical use. And so if there's some analog which is medically superior, it also allows that research, keeps that door open in case there's something positive for society for one of these analogs. This makes it permanent. It gives law enforcement one more tool. President Trump has said he will sign it. I'm glad that he will. Let's give as many tools as we can to law enforcement to take that 74,000 down to 0. So.
Questions for Senator Kennedy? Or Senator Cassidy, sorry. It's kind of like in Louisiana, my bad.
Well, what am I going to say now?
You have to have some good.
That dog don't hunt. Anyone?
Question?
Right here. Are the votes there?
Yeah, the votes will be there. We had Foreign Committee. We had 7 co-sponsors from the Democratic side. I've worked closely with Senator Heinrich. This is bipartisan because, frankly, fentanyl is a bipartisan problem. And so if someone doesn't vote for this, you're thinking, wait a second, you're going to turn a blind eye for the fact that 74,000 people died last year, and a similar number the year before, and a similar number the year before. So I think the votes will be there. And it's passed the House. And so once it passes here, the president can sign it into law. Anyone else? Thank you.
Couple quick questions.
Senator Thune, I know you have said that you hope that these tariffs are temporary, but the president is only ratcheting these up and the markets are now swooning. Would you encourage him to now back off of this trade war?
Well, I think that what I've said before, I think as you know, is that the president, I believe, is trying to accomplish a specific objective here, and that is to halt the flow of fentanyl into this country. And the tariffs are a tool in order to make that happen. And I am supportive of using tariffs in a way to accomplish a specific objective, in this case, ending drug traffic. But as I've said before, I hope these are temporary. I think the one thing that markets don't like is uncertainty, and there's obviously uncertainty, I think, around that tariff policy at the moment.
You had criticism for the Democrats about how they might potentially block this, but we know of at least one Republican, Senator Paul, who's opposed to this, maybe a couple of others. Do you have the same criticism for Republicans who might be opposed to this, and would you accuse them of filibustering this bill?
You talking about the CR. Well, I think we've, as we've done our head count, I think we feel very comfortable that we will deliver a majority vote for this. The question is, can we get the 60-vote supermajority threshold that's necessary to pass it? And in order to do that, we need Democrats. So we will have our conference on board in support of keeping the government open and finishing off what is last year's business, which is Chuck Schumer, the Democrats in the Senate at the time, not taking a single appropriations bill, putting it on the floor, or moving it forward. This is a pileup from last year. This is FY25. We want to get it in the rearview mirror, and we think the best way to do that, right now at least, based on what the House is going to do today and what the President supports, is to pass this CR. The question is, will the Democrats filibuster it? And we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, I was going to say on that point, Mr. Leader, have you gotten any indication that the Democrats will join you? And if they don't, are you willing to consider this alternate CR that congressional appropriators have put forth that would extend government funding rate?
I think the problem you've got with what a temporary CR does is it just continues to punt the problem down the road. And pretty soon you run up against April 30th deadline in which a sequester would take place, which would be a terrible outcome, particularly for defense, and is a totally avoidable outcome if we will simply take action to do this today or this week. So my view is that the best way to fund the government and to deal with last year's business so we can move on to this year's business is to fund this or to vote for this CR. And I'm hoping that we'll have the requisite number of Democrats in order to do that. And I think anything else they put out there is a smokescreen because at this point there's really one solution on the table. It keeps the government funded. It addresses the core issues I think a lot of Democrats care about in terms of programs that they want to have funded through the end of the year. And we think it represents the best solution at the moment. One more.
Elon Musk said yesterday on Fox Business that there's up to $500 billion to $700 billion in waste in some of the entitlement programs. He says there are 20 million dead people in the Social Security database. Would it make sense for Republicans to look at some of these programs for waste, fraud, and abuse, even if it's Social Security and Medicare, given what Musk is saying?
I think we want to look at all programs of government for waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think what he was saying, my understanding is he was speaking specifically to the issue of waste, fraud, and abuse, not to the underlying programs. But I think any program in government probably can be run more efficiently and probably in a less costly way with a better return to the American taxpayer. So I think looking at the whole of government and trying to determine whether or not there are savings that can be achieved through whether it's reductions in personnel, reductions in overhead, all those sorts of things ought to be on the table. And I think that's the point he was simply making. I don't think he was talking about the underlying programs or their importance, which I think we all value. Thank you.
Thank you.